Hello everyone, my name is Slfy. This is going to be the first video of the channel, and I am making this as a passionate project channel, so expect a lot of videos like this for future videos. So I welcome all of you that have somehow found this channel, and I thank each and one of you do stick around this channel for future videos. But let's get to the topic on the other hand. Anyway, this video is going to be dedicated to Silent Hill 2 and its 20th year anniversary for the game and my personal experience with it. This is indeed going to cover both subjective matters and opinion-related subjects. Silent Hill, for a long time has been known to be one of the best horror franchises to be ever born. And it is really surprising a small team in the middle of Japan called Team Cell manages to create a game such magnificent that still holds up greatly to this very day, when many games around it fail to live up to the horror of the second games in the series. Believe me, I have played many indie and AAA games, but none have captured the feeling of the second game. And it isn't just nostalgia that I'm talking about. That is not what blocking my view, but many factors, both in the past and the present, which contribute in the game, and I will be covering in this video. What makes a game a game? When we come to think of video games, what comes up first in your head in the 90s? Is it Mario? Is it Metal Gear? Is it Street Fighter? These games all have something special in them, sure. One game is a cinematic stealth game, and the other is a platform, and the last is an arcade-style fighter. But they all focus on gameplay as first thumb of rule. And to some degree, I agree with this stand. A lot of times, gameplay is needed to be tweaked, optimized, and ready for everything else, because that is the basis of games after all. They are entertainment. They all serve their games in their unique times, even some call revolutionary. But it didn't end there either. This was a time when 3D graphics was relatively new, and when 2D still dominated the majority, if not half, of gaming then, where the PS1 was a very successful console myself owned, and itself had many 2D titles and games. It was then that gaming was young and saw a new generation and attraction from cooperation of many studios alike, competing to create the best-selling game on the hardware that game is created on. And one of those corporations was Konami, was a hungry publisher for that award. But my point is, gaming alongside the gameplay will evolving as time goes on. But games don't always need to take gameplay as number one in developing a freaking game or something. It should be important not all games require 1000% innovative gameplay to be a fun experience either. And should be focused heavily on other aspects of games too. Not just graphics or gameplay in its own right. Should be focusing a lot of things, like the brand and the optimization and that, alongside spreading the games on many platforms so they can make as much money, as most games at the time were very exclusive to one console or another. But there was this one company, Konami. So they hired a small team called Team Silent, and they requested them to make a Resident Evil clone. But instead, they created was very much different and was arguably the best horror game at the time in 1999. Team Silent, the same devs that wanted to copy Resident Evil, has now instead created a really great game, even a masterpiece with some call, both in story and graphics even. But here's what I brought up earlier. Games don't need innovative gameplay to be great or better. Silent Hill was proof of it. In its core, it is a similar Resident Evil game, yet with some changes as operating its own story and engine graphics different. Following the great success of the first game, Team Silent gained major recognition, and they were tasked to craft another light-up Silent Hill game. The engine they ran was a custom-made one, and forgive me for butchering this pronunciation, but Takuyoso, the programmer of the first game, who has overworked himself in the first one, to the point he slept in the office for 2 years on the development of the first one, alongside using multiple computers for the CGI animations, but it didn't earn his favor. When making this second game, he created an inspired story from Fyodor Dostoevsky, the famous novel Crime and Punishment. Tsuyama, the director of the first game, was also directing the second one, and the writing that was written by Hiroyuki Ueko and Sato himself as the team set out to work on the game within the 2 years they had. And they were greatly helped from the success of the first one that helped to up the budget of the second game, and it really shows. Alongside it was being developed for the PlayStation 2. That was in itself a hit console that heated the competition of many of its so-called enemies. A funny thing, they had a feature within the game that enabled a radar map in the screen. That was obviously scrapped, as you already had a town map you could only open if you are stopped moving, which balanced out the game. But in 2001, September 24th, the game released for the public and exclusively on the PlayStation 2. In the start of Silent Hill 2, you play as James Sunderland, an everyday man with not really special abilities, doesn't have an overpowered strength, or isn't even a father like the last game. He is an everyday man that you can fill his shoes from the get-go. The thing is about Silent Hill, especially in the original trilogy, the game always puts you through either an ordinary father or a random guy or a teenage girl. Also, this justifies the controls, which is our tank controls, as you may know. Resident Evil started this trend at the time, which helped great, especially with its limited graphics visuals that only stick with pre-rendered backgrounds with little to no camera movements. But in Silent Hill, it is used against the player and as the player. First of all, you can move your camera with the right analog stick, but it is limited as you can only move for where James is facing and the camera can be also used to give a scare factor, as the cameras can change positions inside buildings and can hide crucial items and puzzles. But also another vital feature is the inventory. Unlike Resident Evil 1, you can carry as many items as you want and not be restricted by a box or a chest. Depending on your opinion, it may be a good or bad feature. But another thing that Silent Hill also has is a saving mechanic. Instead of having autosaves or saves anywhere, you are limited to certain places that have this red glowing paper. When you press, you get James' face alongside the menu where you can save your game slots. But also another thing, the combat in itself. At the beginning of the game, you find a wooden plank alongside with a radio. And monster happens to be there as well. And I like how the game presents it. You pick a weapon and the game gives you a monster for you to attack. And speaking of monsters, these monsters give me nightmares from seeing them. And the first monster you encounter is a lying figure. And from first glance, you may think this is a monster is putting his hand on the pocket. And you would be right. That's how the monster origins was formed in the making of the game, alongside with some iconic monsters returning from the first game as a nurse. As you progress within the game, with this apartment complex solving puzzles that is pretty decent, and they aren't exactly as hard as the first one, but can get annoying and raging from solving clocks and to going to the right places. But then, when the face of gaming was forever changed. A horrifying creature appears behind the bars, a pyramid head. When I first saw him, I really freaked out and quit the game. I haven't felt terror ever since then, and I gotta admit, I didn't complete and reach that far into the game when I have played it initially in the PS2, but I replayed it not too long ago, and it did really capture me and hook me on the game, and I have completed soon after. But the story is what really captured me the most, which I will be talking about just in a sec. As similar this game to its predecessor in its mechanical gameplay, but here's what the difference about the game between the first and the second one. This game delved into the town of Silent Hill a lot more than the first game did, and rightfully so. Instead of having a call that has chased you down and summoning a god from your freaking daughter, instead, the second game has strayed away from it and felt like a game of its own, yet a sequel at the same time. And it focuses heavily on the complexity of the human condition, both at narrative and psychological level. In Silent Hill 2, you play as James Sunderland, taking place in an unknown time and period. James came to Silent Hill voluntarily due to having a letter sent from his supposed dead wife, called Mary, that passed away from 3 years from a disease. You can tell James is someone that isn't really charismatic or a strong protagonist as usual story tropes in the video games at the time, but rather a confused fellow trying to go to Silent Hill to meet his wife. In the middle of doing that, he stumbles across a lady in the graveyard called Angela.
Excuse me,
Oh,
I'm sorry. I
No,
was
it's
just...
okay. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm kind of lost.
Lost?
Yeah. I'm looking for Silent Hill. Is this the right way?
Yeah. It's hard to see with this fog, but there's only the one road. You can't miss it.
Thanks.
But
Yes?
I think you'd better stay away. This town, there's something wrong with it. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Is it dangerous?
maybe. And it's not just the fog either.
Okay,
It's...
I got it.
And James exchanged their reasons of why they are in this town, and she'd be claiming to be finding her mother, and James is finding his wife. But I guess this is an attempt to highlight the voice acting in itself. In my personal opinion, I found it a bit awkward, but I think that's how they're meant to be. But it's part of the voice acting in this game. As you may later know, these characters aren't exactly the same as people in this town. But as you progress in the game and encounter the first monster, the lying figure, which will be the most common enemy in the game, you will find a map of the town, which makes things so much easier because my poo-poo brain never thinks to walk without opening one. But then you find a apartment complex which is a very important building, as most of the game takes place right there, there. But after finding a hallway that is very surprisingly tight compared to the rest of the place, you find these bars blocking the way that I mentioned earlier. But you notice something there. There's a key near the bars. You may reach with your hands, but as James does that, a little girl appears from nowhere.
Ow! Hey, wait! Damn it.
And that's what kids do. But you lose it as she knocks it out. And so you have to find another one from somewhere else. As you enter one of the rooms, you find Pyramid Head, so you hide in this closet nearby, and James is very much scared, you can tell. But thankfully, James leaves the closet, so he walks out safe. But moving on, you later find a new character called Eddie, throwing up in the toilets for some reason. But he highlights that he saw the monsters, confirming indeed that James is not hallucinating whatsoever. But he also brings up another strange yet odd thing. He isn't from Silent Hill yet. He is actually from another town, but he came here for some reason. And you don't know yet because he hasn't explained it yet. Because all of the characters you meet in this town are all here for a reason. They all come here for such of something. So basically, as you go in the park, you find a person leaning on the fence, and it turns out to be Mary? No, it's Maria. For some strange thing, she looks like Mary, which confuses James, but she is a completely different person. And I am gonna spoil the ending, so leave the video and play the game if you don't want to get spoiled. But essentially, the monsters and the characters you meet are all manifestation of James and his guilt and his sin. And it turns out Mary wasn't dead for 3 years, but actually 3 days. And in the beginning of the game, Mary is in your back of your truck, and you don't know this until one of the endings. So James is essentially a killer. He murdered his wife because she was so sick that she could not be saved from her ill. So she was gonna die soon anyway. And the problem is that James was constantly being trapped by her. She sometimes goes crazy and yells at him, and she still wants him, to stay with her. But he could not. She was taking too much. He was taking too much freedom, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So, yeah, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and press the like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. And yes, this is my first video, so don't expect really much of a quality in this video. But I will try my best next time, and hopefully you stick around, and hopefully you can see much better topics later on. But yeah, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.